Welcome to the TDS Early Years podcast. Now, each week we're going to be joined by different educational experts from across the globe who are going to offer exclusive insights, inspiration and guidance to help us as practitioners unlock all the potential for learning that there is in the early years. So to be first to hear about future episodes and to access all of the follow-up content, including ideas for your own setting, Pinterest, mood boards, and loads more, you can sign up for exclusive access using the link in our podcast description. Hello, my name is Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and I am the host for this week's TDS Talking Early Years podcast, and I'm an early years consultant, author, and trainer. So in this first series of the TDS Talking Early Years podcast, we're exploring those amazing adventures of outdoor learning in the early years. And I'm going to be talking to a number of global experts to inspire your everyday practice and unlock some of the potential for outdoor play with early years children. And I'm delighted today to introduce my guest, Sue Asquith, who is an award-winning international early childhood consultant. Good morning, Sue.
Good morning, Alistair. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good.
Really thrilled to have you on the podcast. But for anybody that hasn't come across you or your work, could you just give us a brief introduction into who is Sue Asquith and what do you do?
Okay, absolutely. So my name's Sue, as you said. I'm an early childhood consultant working internationally and also throughout the UK. I suppose in terms of outdoor play, my kind of early experiences are as a Girl Guide, a Queen's Guide, and I was a guide leader and also a venture scout. So got kind of lots of outdoor pursuits there. So even though I didn't do any specific forest school training or nature kindergarten or anything like that, lots of kind of knowledge to bring with me and training in terms of that and inspiring the outdoors. I used to be a childminder and we had a garden here at home where we did a lot of outdoor pursuits with children, but also really lucky to live across the road from a country park where we could really explore lots and lots of different things there as well. So yeah, lots of different things happening. I'm an author of a book called Self-Regulation Schools and Young Children, and I do consultancy visits to help people prepare for Ofsted inspections and also deliver lots of training online and face-to-face. So loads of things, which obviously is really inspiring to be able to see everybody's practice as well.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the value of using outdoor spaces for all the areas of learning in the early years framework, and also how we as adults can really support that learning. So welcome back, Sue.
Thank you. Nice to speak to you again.
So in terms of using that outdoor space to represent all of those areas of learning, again, I think it can be a bit simpler when you're thinking about indoors because we've got very definite areas indoors where you'll have your mark making space and you'll have your construction space. But ideally, outdoors doesn't always look like that. So how can practitioners work on incorporating those areas into that space?
So I know in one of the other episodes we've talked about that continuous provision, but I think it is having that holistic look at what's going on outside and really thinking about each area of learning, specifically for the ages and stages of the children as well. I know we've spoken before about maybe some settings that are really lucky because they've got maybe that outdoor area for babies and toddlers and preschools, but obviously a lot of people are pack-away settings or maybe they have that kind of utilised space that lots of people use and things like that. But I think it's really important we have that overarching kind of view of what's happening here. A lot of time we can do lots of things in small group work, maybe with your key person or with friendship groups and things like that in terms of PSED. Loads of things to think about there that we can maybe tap into. I think a lot of things that maybe get overlooked because obviously physical development kind of happens outside the large scale stuff. It's just like a fundamental thing, isn't it? But sometimes we forget about those the kind of the finer motor skill stuff that could happen outside as well, and also maths and literacy. And I don't mean just having numbered trees and things like that, because I feel we've been kind of through that big generational thing, haven't we, where people expected you to have the numbers on the trees in the garden and things like that. But really thinking about what can we do to tap into those kind of things, little things, counting the children as they go outside and as they come back in again. Can you find a matching pair of wellies or all sorts of different things, isn't there? We can do the ordinal things. We can do the sub-sizing with the natural things. There's all sorts of things. But again, it's the practitioner's skills there, isn't it, of that teachability to see that teachable moment rather than, like you said, in one of the previous things, having that can you count the conkers kind of setup because you want to tick the math box outside. that it's seeing those teachable moments and having that adaptability and to follow the children's leads and catch that teachable moment as well. I think that's really important.
Yeah, you did right. And when we're talking about, well, maths, we could talk about all the subjects really, but in terms of mathematics, again, I still work with lots of settings who are expected to staple gun laminate numbers to trees or pop a number line outside in a fence. And again, it's sometimes a journey for the senior leadership or the managers of those settings to realize that actually children don't suddenly run outside and say, well, now a number's stapled to a tree, I'm going to engage with it. Mm-hmm. I think one of the really useful things you can do as a team, and again, it's good just for your professional development, is to go back to those kind of the things that underpin children's mathematical development. So it's all just about understanding the science of child development. And we know that skills like counting are important, but again, how do children develop the ability to count? Is it really linked to a number line, or is adding that symbol to the amount actually comes way down the counting journey? That ability to recognize the two-ness of 2 and the 3-ness of 3 and be able to identify and subitize, that's so easy to do in an outdoor space. I think sometimes as well as practitioners, we just need to let moments happen, and we are conditioned sometimes to always go back to the how many question. So a child will come up with whatever they've got, and it's really hard for you to suppress that urge to say, that's lovely. How many conkers have you got in your hand? How many sticks have you got there? And so it doesn't matter how many sticks. This is not a how many moment. This is a, oh my goodness, you've made those sticks balance. You've created a shelter or whatever you've done. It's about suppressing that urge to say, you know, what's this, how many, what if, and actually just go with the moment. But if it's a team, you can, around things like mathematics, look at those key principles that underpin how children become mathematicians. Then suddenly the world opens up in terms of, oh, that would be really good for compartmentalization. That would be really good for pattern. I can add things like trellis into my outdoor area that, yes, I can grow things up, but I can also put it flat on the floor. Children can collect things. I can have shells and feathers and sticks, and we can talk about groupings and sorting and sets. So you're right. It's opportunities are endless that are nothing to do with laminates and tough spots and number lines. It's just about getting into that mindset and noticing those opportunities.
Absolutely, yeah. And the same with literacy as well. It doesn't have to be, you know, laminated mud kitchen recipes or anything like that. There's loads of things outside. And if you think about maybe there's the phase 1 side of things, the, you know, environmental sounds, and maybe you could maybe make a music wall with your pots and pans and things like that, or maybe give them a chopstick or a stick to go along the metal railings with and find out what the difference is between that and the wooden ones. And there's loads and loads of things that really subtle, but actually are phase 1 phonics and really easy to do. And the children don't really know that they're learning things. It's fun, and it's but you know that you're doing your stuff in terms of kind of laying those foundations in the brain as well.
You did right. And then again, thinking about various settings of work that they've done ACE stuff. One had lots of different tin cans from there. It was a nursery and a school, and it was a school kitchen, and they were safe open, so they weren't sharp, but they were big ones and small ones. And on rainy days, like heavy rain, they turned them upside down. And because of the different size of the can, it made a different noise when the rain fell on it. And then a child took one under a tree just to have the continuous drip. Even putting a tarpaulin over something drippy and sitting underneath it, you know, the rain in paper cups, all those things where you're listening and thinking, and it's just about the sound that you're hearing in the space outside. It doesn't have to necessarily be a wind chime. It doesn't necessarily have to be something musical. It's just about that.
Yeah,
using the space. I
was in a setting once where the children, it started to rain a lot, and the children were quite mesmerised by it. And I think they had maybe some kind of like almost like conservatory, so that children could really hear it raining. So they went out, they got the wellies on and the waterproofs, and off they went. And the practitioner said, maybe we could collect the rain and see how much we could collect. So there was various different receptacles outside, and children were stood waiting. And one child walked off, and he was started to build the milk crates up in the tower. And I thought, well, this looks interesting. But a practitioner could have gone, we're supposed to also, we've come back, we're supposed to be doing this. But I thought, you know, she was really good in kind of giving that respect. And then I asked, I said, that looks really interesting. What are you doing? And he said, well, if I build this big tower up like this and then put my pot on, it's nearer the clouds and I'll catch more rain than everybody else. And I thought that's really, really clever. But that could have been curtailed by a practitioner who wanted to say, no, come back here, little Johnny, we're doing this. And
we're doing this. Yeah.
So it's really important, isn't it, to think about kind of giving them that free rein to think and to create critically and be creative about what's happening there as well.
And if we're looking at, expanding then across all of those areas, you're right, it lends itself really easily, outdoor play, to gross motor if you allow children to be gross motor. But again, if you're putting lots of small activities and for children to rotate on, it tends to be quite small motor. Mm-hmm. But if you've got lots of things for children to collect and sort, even again working with the setting that we're doing transient art, so for them what they said was basically in our outdoor space we don't use scissors and glue and all that kind of stuff. That happens in our workshop inside. Our outdoor art and creativity is all using natural materials. So they had pillowcases which they rolled out, and then the children went and got various feathers and stones and sticks and seeds and conkers and all sorts of stuff. And they made pictures which they then took a photograph of with the iPad, but then they knew it went away at the end of the session. And they also had a mud paint station, which was just a pit with some mud in it, a couple of scoops, and a camping water dispenser with a tap on the bottom. And they just got containers, they mixed the mud to the consistency they wanted, and they did loads of painting, but just with mud. And they said, if you want to paint, we don't use brushes in our outdoor space. I've got loads of different size brushes in our indoor space. You can paint with found objects. Now, they had quite a large, overgrown outdoor space. There were lots of twigs and sticks and grass and all sorts. But very young children who were thinking about the process of too much water, not enough water, how you applied this mud paint, what you applied it to, vertical surfaces, horizontal surfaces. One asked if they could make the mud paint coloured. So a big discussion about how they could do that. And I suppose in one respect, you could have seen that as a restriction, that these adults were saying, well, this is what's available outdoors. But it actually prompted the children to use their knowledge of how we do this indoors, but use that knowledge differently. And the creativity was massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I mean, depending on what you've got going on outside, I mean, obviously you could use the flower heads in there or the berries or whatever. You could make some all sorts of different colours and different textures of paint as well, couldn't you, as well? I've seen some really inspirational things in terms of expressive arts that are not particularly the kind of the creative stuff as in the mark making and things, but maybe where they can maybe put on little shows and things like that. So some of the nurseries that I've been to have had like maybe a palette or a crate or sometimes just a taped off area or a chalked off area, so children can maybe recall a story that might have been going on outside, or they can make a show. Some of them use like different coloured shower curtains at the back to give various different backdrops if they've got some topic or a certain focus book of the week or what have you to inspire children. But loads of different things that are happening outside that can be really, thinking about that continuous provision again, and that kind of how can we have those learning opportunities, but at all areas of learning. Musical instruments that they've made outside, the music wall, what we talked about earlier. There's loads of different things that we can kind of empower children to do outside here as well. But taking their lead, because some of the children might be really creative and want to do the singing and dancing, and some of them might not and go somewhere else to the different areas to do different things as well.
Yeah, I think that's about as well, keeping it really open-ended. And I think there are lots of outdoor companies out there that are absolutely brilliant in terms of being able to enhance your space with their resourcing. And there are others where you pay an awful lot of money and you install things that are restrictive. So I think you're dead right about the little opportunities for performance, and I'm dead pleased that you said things like a palette, because some settings I've worked with have had massive stages built, and it's a big structure in their outdoor space, and then children don't always want to put a show on every day. But then another one I was at recently had just got a palette and screwed 4 casters. They were lockable casters, and obviously somebody that knows what they're doing, screwed 4 casters into the bottom, which meant they could lock it. But also if they took the locks off, they used it as a trolley for transporting sand and water. They used it as a trolley for transporting each other, which some members of staff were way happy with and others weren't quite as pleased with. But then they locked the wheels and they had a little stage to perform on, but it meant that that one resource could be used all over the place. Another setting I worked with paid quite a lot of money to have a really beautiful pirate ship put in the middle of their outdoor space. And everybody oohed and ahed over the pirate ship. And I think it was the Parent Support Association that would raise a lot of money to put it in. But what they found was they consistently got pirate play from a particular group of children. Nobody went into the pirate ship and said, well, I know it's a pirate ship, but I'm going to pretend that it's whatever. As soon as you walk out with a massive pirate ship, and of course, pirate play is not about let's be quiet pirates and sit in the corner and colour in. It's about let's fight, there's the sharks, there are crocodiles, let's throw people overboard, let's steal treasure. So this wonderful pirate ship, which was beautiful, escalated the play into very physical, very loud, very kind of rough and tumble play, excluded a group of children who, for whatever reason, felt they didn't fit with that play type, and caused the adults all sorts of stress around managing that play. Where actually, if we give children a palette and some fabric and some blocks, we can have a pirate ship if that's where today takes us, but we can also have a train or whatever it may be on different days. So again, keeping it ambiguous sometimes doesn't look as pretty through the eyes of an adult. So outdoor spaces can sometimes look a little bit like somebody's just fly tipped in your outdoor area. But those spaces sometimes have the key to some of the best play and interaction.
I love that one. I love the one, the palette with the casters on. It's really lovely. I was in a setting a couple of weeks ago, and they'd managed, I don't know how they've managed, whether they've managed to resource these things overnight or whatever, when you kind of go past things, like, oh, I just have one of those. But they've got some cones and some kind of construction, kind of, you know, if your road was closed, kind of construction things. And the children were having a whale of a time digging and doing all sorts of different things in this construction area. But then when the parents come to look round, they think they're having some building work done, but they don't kind of see the potential of what the children are doing in there. But it was a really lovely space. But again, maybe with a little bit more thought, they might have maybe put a tape measure in there and things like that for the children to just expand that learning a little bit more, or maybe some clipboards and some pencils for the children maybe to draw and plan if they wanted to do, but those different opportunities to kind of dig in deeper maybe and expand their learning a little bit more as well. But it was a lovely, lovely space, and the children were having loads of fun.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you mentioned in previous episodes, those kind of provocations from adults that are there for children to come across, experiment with, maybe use in a million different ways that the adult didn't expect them to, but they also give the adult the opportunity, if it arises, to have a teachable moment. So it's not about saying, as an adult, I'm going to walk into that area and say, right, let's look at the tape measure, let's count the numbers. But as an adult, if a child's got the tape measure, or I come along into their play and I say, well, that's really interesting, one's taller than the other, I'm going to measure it. Mm-hmm. It's about that little bit of demonstration, that little bit of scaffolding, that little bit of teaching. Mm-hmm. And those items have been placed there to allow us as adults maximum opportunities without us railroading children's play by saying, right, everybody stop. I've got 3 congas in this hand and 2 congas in this hand. How many congas have I got? Because that's a recipe for children going, no, it's all right. I'm off now. I'm going to play somewhere else. And
you've broken that lovely opportunity that they were doing. You've kind of interfered. There's that interaction interfered debate, isn't there, in terms of what we should be doing there. Yeah. But again, it's that teachable moment, and you knowing if the children need you to extend that, or whether they just need to stand back and observe what's going on and just make sure that everything's going to be okay and suitable and safe, and you're supporting them with your supervision rather than your actually teaching, kind of taking over that teaching situation.
Yeah. I think it's a point we've made before, but it's a really fine balance. You know, and like 35 years into my early years practice, I still don't get it right. And I, like you've, been all over the world and interacted with all sorts of different settings and different children, because we're all unique. And how I interpret a situation is not how a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old interprets that exact same situation. Mm-hmm. But that is part of the joy of the job that we do. And I think when as practitioners, we are able to relax into the fact that we're not going to get it right all of the time, and that sometimes, often, watching can be as valuable as teaching, then that's when the practice starts to get really rich, because you've given yourself permission not to be on teaching duty all the time, but to be on noticing duty, mm-hmm. which enables you to do way more than just follow that one kind of outcome that you had in your head.
Yeah, it's really important. And important that even when you're being observed, so if you and I might not be going to do an inspection, but if we're going out, they just feel, I often call it verbal diarrhea, and I'm really sorry, people might be sat listening to this over the tea time. I just feel that sometimes I go, like we mentioned earlier, what colour is it? How many? And they don't need that. And a couple of times recently, I've been in baby room and toddler rooms, and I've said, "This looks really interesting. Can you tell me intent behind what you're doing?" And it was inside, actually, not outside. But then suddenly they started going, "Well, the babies are learning about the countries for the World Cup, and we're talking about the colours." And I'm going, "Really? Because these babies are babbling, you know?" And our practitioner ended up babbling because they were nervous. And straight away they seem to think that numbers and shapes have to come out of their mouth, but actually it's not all about all those things, is it? It's about all the other things that they were doing at the same time as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely not. And that's going back to that point about us as practitioners being expert in our craft, which takes a long time to learn. In fact, it's a never stopping journey, because we find out new things about how children develop almost on a daily basis. But yeah, going back to that essence of child development. And it's really sad that a lot of our community have been conditioned that these kind of more focused outcomes around literacy and numeracy, which are important, but are the only end result. And actually what we need to do is celebrate the journey. And if we can take that journey outside, and if we can allow children to really develop, physically, cognitively, and as human beings by using this amazing space that changes on a daily basis depending on the weather, the season, the people that are in it, what happens to be flying overhead or driving past. It's just a never-ending treasure trove of learning opportunities. So why wouldn't you spend as much time as you possibly could in the outdoor space?
Yeah, and it's not about, it's also, I think, not over-resourcing, because the children that I used to look after, instead of bringing the kitchen, they play kitchen outside and all the stuff that might go with that, if you gave them all the outside, you don't have to give it their big leaf and a conker, and so suddenly you've got a cafe and it's this and this and this, because the children want it to be there. But if they've got that imagination behind that, which a lot of children I find lack nowadays, because they've got lots of toys and things at home, and there are things that are purposeful and they've got to do this and this and this, that end outcome. There's sometimes I had to teach a few children at the end of my childmind career how to play, and that sounds really odd to me, because they'd play cafes maybe, or whatever it was, if I was doing it, and then if I stepped away to do an observation or see what we're doing next, then they didn't have that creativity. And outdoors and indoors, I think there's a load of opportunities, especially like say outdoors with that changing hue all the time, the changing weather. There's all sorts of things for them to learn and to do, that learn through playing, that it's not like a lesson, they're just naturally kind of soaking that up, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant place to end, in just on that thought that play is a huge vehicle for learning. And actually, if we can take everything back to play, that's a brilliant starting point for both children and practitioners. Literally, Sue, I have really enjoyed these podcasts that we've done. We could have talked for another 3 hours all about the joys of being an early years practice, but thank you for your insights. Thank you for your thoughts, but also for those hints and tips that you've experienced that have been really effective, that have been really useful. So all remains for me to say is, Sue Asquith, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So I'd like to say a huge thank you to my guest Sue for joining us and providing such valuable insights into outdoor play. So you've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Alistair Bryce-Clegg, and with Sue Asquith. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes and be the first to hear about future episodes and access exclusive follow-up content, which include things like ideas for your setting and Pinterest boards that will help you shop for everything outdoors.